The picture was not supposed to exist. In my hands, it felt heavy, like a stone pulled from a cold, dark river. It showed my husband Orion, the man I had loved for 25 years. He was not alone. He was kissing a woman, a younger woman, with bright red hair that looked like fire against her white dress. But that was not the shocking part. The shocking part was where they were standing. They were on the front porch of a small blue house, the exact same house my grandmother had left to me, the one I had just sold to fund Orion's dream project. A project he said would secure our retirement. My name is Yesenia Bates, and I am 48 years old. For most of my life, I was a wife and a mother. I raised 2 beautiful children in our perfect home in Charlotte, North Carolina. I packed their lunches, cheered at their soccer games, and held them when their hearts were broken. I supported Orion's career, moving across the country twice for his promotions. I was the quiet pillar holding up our family. And I thought that was enough. I thought our love was a fortress. But that picture in my hand showed me our fortress was built on sand, and the tide was coming in. It all started 3 months ago. Orion came home late from work, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I asked him about it, and he just laughed. He patted my head like I was a little dog. "Oh, Yesenia," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "You worry too much. You're too sweet, too simple to understand the stress I'm under." The next week, when I asked about our savings account, he got angry. "It's handled," he snapped. "Don't trouble your pretty little head with it. You're just too dumb to notice these things anyway." That word, dumb, echoed in my heart. It was a poison dart, and it hit its mark. He thought I was dumb. He thought I was the happy, clueless wife who would just bake cookies and wait for him to come home. For 25 years, I let him believe that. It was easier. But something in me broke that day. The woman he called dumb went online that night. While he snored in our bed, I didn't cry. I researched. I found a private investigator, a man named Mr. Graves with a quiet voice and tired eyes. I paid him with the money I had secretly saved from my small online baking business. It was my just-in-case money. This felt like the ultimate, just-in-case. Mr. Graves was fast. In 2 weeks, he handed me a thick manila envelope. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bates," he said, and he truly looked it. I opened it in my car, parked in a quiet corner of a grocery store parking lot. My hands shook so much I could barely pull out the stack of photos and papers. There were pictures of Orion with the red-haired woman, whose name was Serena. They were at fancy dinners, laughing and holding hands. They were at jewelry stores. And then, there was the last picture. The one of them kissing on the porch of my grandmother's house. The house he told me we sold to a stranger. Behind the pictures were bank statements. My husband, my Orion, had been slowly draining our joint retirement account for over a year. He had funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars, our entire future, into a new account. An account under his name and Serena's. He hadn't just stolen my heart. He had stolen my life, my security, my past, and my future. He was planning to leave me with nothing but an empty house full of memories that were now all lies. He was building a new life on the ashes of mine, with a woman half my age. As I sat there in my quiet living room, the silence screamed at me. Every family photo on the wall felt like a joke. The vows we had made at the altar felt like a distant, foolish dream. The pain was so big it felt like it would swallow me whole. But then, I heard his words again in my head. Too dumb to notice. And the pain began to change. It sharpened. It turned from a wild, screaming grief into a cold, hard, and silent rage. He had underestimated me. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness. He thought I was a sheep, but he had just awakened a wolf. He thought he was smart. He thought he had the perfect plan. He would take all the money, leave me with all the debt, and start a new, happy life while I was left to crumble. He believed I would just cry and fall apart. He didn't know that the woman who raised 2 children and ran a household with perfect detail was more than capable of planning, too. He had taught me about strategy, not with words, but by showing me how cruel a person could be. Now, it was my turn to show him what I had learned. A new plan was starting to form in my mind. A plan for revenge. A plan so perfect, so complete, that he would never see it coming. He wanted to leave me with nothing. I would make sure he had less than nothing. I would take back everything he stole from me, and more. If you want to see how a woman they called dumb brings a powerful man to his knees, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter of this story. I would also love to feel your support, so please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The sound of his car pulling into the driveway made me jump. He was home. Quickly, I slid the thick envelope under the sofa cushion and wiped the single tear that had escaped. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and walked towards the door, a sweet, welcoming smile on my face. The curtain was rising on the greatest performance of my life. The show was about to begin, and my husband had no idea he was the star and the victim. "Honey, you're home," I chirped, making sure my voice was just a little too bright. Orion walked in, dropping his briefcase by the door, a small, tired smile on his face. He smelled of that same perfume again, faint now, but still there, like a ghostly hand reaching out from the picture in my mind. He kissed my cheek, a quick, dry peck that used to feel normal, but now felt like a lie. He didn't notice anything. Not the tightness in my smile, not the storm brewing behind my eyes. He just saw Yesenia, his dumb wife, waiting for him. "Long day at the office, sweet pea," he sighed, heading straight for the fridge. "Got to keep pushing for that big deal. It's all for our future, you know." He pulled out a beer, popping the top with a familiar hiss. Each word he spoke about our future felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was talking about his future, with her, in my grandmother's house, with our money. The anger simmered, a slow burn that kept my hands from shaking. I had to play this perfectly. For now, I was still the happy wife. He sat down on the sofa, right above where the envelope was hidden. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if he felt it? What if the edge of the papers poked through the cushion? I quickly offered. "Can I get you some dinner, darling? I made your favorite pot roast." He grunted, already scrolling through his phone. "Sure, whatever. I'm just so exhausted." He didn't even look up. It was a familiar scene, one that used to make me feel warm and needed. Now, it just made me feel invisible. As I dished out his food, my mind raced. How long had this been going on? Had he always thought I was dumb? Was our entire marriage a performance for him, with me as the unwitting clown? I remembered our wedding day, a lifetime ago. He had looked at me with such love, such promise in his eyes. Was that real? Or was he always just a good actor, waiting for his chance to steal the show and leave me in the dark? The questions swirled, each one a fresh sting. "So, how was your day, Yesenia?" he finally asked, without looking up from his phone. It was a habit, a polite question he didn't expect a real answer to. "Oh, you know," I replied, forcing lightness into my voice. "The usual. Baked a few cakes for Mrs. Henderson's party. Cleaned the house. Tried to figure out that new pension paperwork you left on the counter." I watched his face closely, but there was no flicker of worry. He just nodded, taking a bite of his pot roast. "Yeah, that pension stuff is complicated," he mumbled through a mouthful of food. "Don't bother your head too much with it, honey. I'll get to it. You just focus on your cakes." He smiled, a genuine smile this time, but it was for the pot roast, not for me. He believed his own lie. He really thought I was content with baking and dusting, that I wouldn't understand things like pensions or bank accounts. He had no idea I had already spent hours poring over financial documents online. That night, as he slept soundly beside me, I couldn't close my eyes. I crept out of bed, careful not to make a sound. In the quiet darkness of the living room, I pulled out the envelope again. I looked at the photos, one by one. Serena's fiery red hair, her bright laugh frozen in time. Orion's arm around her, his hand gently touching her back. They looked so happy, so free. It was a life he was building, a shiny new beginning, while mine was being systematically dismantled. I found the property deeds in the envelope too. My grandmother's house, my house, was not sold to a developer as Orion had claimed. It had been transferred to Serena for $1. A symbolic gesture, making it legally hers, while Orion funneled all the real money into their shared accounts. It was a slap in the face. A grand theft, orchestrated by the man who vowed to cherish and protect me. He had used my own family's legacy, my safe haven, as the foundation for his betrayal. A cold wave washed over me, chilling me to the bone. He wasn't just having an affair. He was orchestrating a complete takeover of my life, my assets, my future. He intended to leave me utterly devastated and penniless. But the Yesenia he knew, the one he thought was too dumb to notice, was gone. In her place, a new Yesenia was born that night, forged in the fires of betrayal and humiliation. She was quiet, yes, but she was also calculating, patient, and absolutely relentless. I knew what I had to do. I had to gather more proof, more details, more weapons for the battle ahead. I had to act like nothing was wrong, like the world was still perfect, while secretly dismantling his. He thought he was playing chess, but he hadn't realized I was already several moves ahead, planning a checkmate he would never see coming. How could he not know? How could a man who slept next to me every night be so blind to the storm inside me? And what would happen if I confronted him now? Would it all fall apart, or would it simply give him time to hide his tracks even better? You won't want to miss what happens next as Yesenia begins her quiet, deadly game. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, making Orion's coffee just the way he liked it, with a single spoonful of sugar. He came downstairs, tying his silk tie, and I handed him the warm mug with a smile. "Big day at the office?" I asked, my voice as smooth as cream. "The biggest," he said, kissing my forehead. "This is the deal that sets us up for life, Yesenia. All my hard work is about to pay off." The lie was so easy for him, so natural. He had no idea I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his judge. The moment his car backed out of the driveway, the house transformed. It was no longer a home. It was a headquarters. The pretty, smiling mask of Yesenia the housewife fell away. I pulled out the envelope from Mr. Graves. It was a good start, but it wasn't enough. Pictures could be explained away. Private bank statements could be argued. I needed something official, something undeniable. I needed proof from the one place we had built our life together, our bank. I knew exactly who I had to see. I didn't dress like a housewife. I put on my navy blue blazer, the one I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences when I needed to be taken seriously. I did my makeup with a steady hand, a warrior painting her face for battle. Looking in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back. Her eyes weren't soft and trusting anymore. They were cold and sharp, like chips of ice. I felt a surge of fear, a little voice telling me to stop, to just cry and let it happen. But a stronger voice, a new one, told me to get in the car and drive. At the bank, I asked for Mr. Henderson. He was a kind, round man who had given my kids their first lollipops and their first savings accounts. He beamed when he saw me. "Yesenia, what a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you?" I leaned in, forcing a warm, slightly conspiratorial smile. "Well, Bill," I said, using his first name. "Orion has just been so busy, and with our 25th anniversary coming up, I wanted to plan a huge surprise trip for him. I need to get a clear picture of our retirement savings to see what I can afford." His smile tightened just a little. Of course. Let's pull up the accounts." He turned to his computer, his fingers tapping on the keyboard. I watched his face. The friendly glow slowly faded, replaced by a look of deep concern. He cleared his throat. "Well, Yesenia," he began, his voice low. "There have been quite a few large withdrawals over the past year. Very large." He turned the screen towards me. I saw the numbers, bigger and more frequent than even Mr. Graves had found. A river of our money, flowing away from us. But that wasn't the worst part. Mr. Henderson pointed to a new line item, one I had never seen before. And Orion took out a home equity line of credit 6 weeks ago, he said gently, as if delivering bad news about a death. He borrowed the maximum amount against your house. The air left my lungs. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. He hadn't just stolen our savings. He had put a debt against our home. The home I raised my children in. The home I thought I would grow old in. I drove home in a daze. The world outside my car window was bright and sunny, but inside, everything was dark and cold. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. This was a demolition. Orion wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to leave me buried in rubble, with no money, no home, and a mountain of debt. He wanted to erase me. The man I had loved and trusted was a monster, and I had been sleeping next to him every single night, completely unaware. The question was no longer what he had done, but what else he was capable of. When I got home, I walked straight into his study, a room I rarely entered. My eyes fell on the small stack of papers on his desk. The pension paperwork he had told me not to worry about. My hands trembled as I picked them up. He was so confident I wouldn't look, so sure I was too dumb to understand. I spread the documents across the dining room table, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. This was the final piece he was trying to hide. The first page was a form to change the beneficiary of his entire life insurance and pension plan. My name, Yesenia Bates, was scribbled out with a thick, angry black line. The pen had pressed so hard it had torn the paper. And underneath, in his perfect neat handwriting, was her name, Serena Vance. He was not only giving her our present, he was giving her the future he was supposed to have with me, even after his death. But as I stared at the page, my eyes caught something else. Behind the beneficiary form, paper clipped so neatly, was another document I almost missed. It was a letter from the Willows, the expensive nursing home where his elderly mother lived. We had both promised her she would have the best care, no matter the cost. But the letter wasn't a friendly update. It was a final notice, stamped in huge red letters that screamed off the page. Overdue. He hadn't paid the bill in 6 months. A chilling, terrible thought hit me like a physical blow. If all our money wasn't going to Serena or his mother, where on earth did his mother go? The red letters on the overdue notice seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Overdue. It wasn't just a word. It was a scream. A scream from a place that was supposed to be safe. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Orion loved his mother, Eleanor. He was a devoted son. He visited her every Sunday. Or did he? The question hung in the silent room, heavy and terrifying. If he wasn't paying for her care, where did his mother go? This was no longer just about stolen money and a broken heart. This was about a person. A fragile, elderly woman I cared for. I couldn't call the nursing home. If I asked questions, they might call Orion to verify something, and my entire secret investigation would be exposed. I had to go there myself. I grabbed my car keys, my hands moving on their own. As I drove, I thought of Eleanor. She had been more of a mother to me than my own had. She taught me how to bake her famous apple pie and always took my side in small arguments with Orion. The thought of her being in trouble, of Orion using her as a pawn in his sick game, filled me with a protective fury I had never felt before. The Willows was just as beautiful as I remembered. It looked more like a luxury resort than a nursing home, with perfectly manicured gardens and cheerful white rocking chairs on a wide porch. It was a place designed to make you feel calm, to assure you that your loved ones were safe and happy. The beauty of it made me feel sick to my stomach, because I knew it was hiding an ugly truth. I parked the car, took a deep, shaky breath, and walked through the gleaming glass doors, a soldier marching into enemy territory. The receptionist at the front desk was a young woman with a kind smile. "Can I help you?" she asked sweetly. I forced my own smile, the one I was getting so good at faking. Yes, I'm here to pay a surprise visit to my mother-in-law, Eleanor Bates. Could you please tell me her room number? The receptionist typed the name into her computer. Her smile faltered. Bates, she murmured, scrolling. Oh. That one little word confirmed my worst fears. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She wouldn't look me in the eye. I'm going to have to get the head nurse, Mrs. Clark. A few minutes later, a stern-faced woman with her hair in a tight bun approached me. Mrs. Bates, she said, her voice professional but cold. I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding. Eleanor is no longer a resident here. I felt my blood run cold. What do you mean, no longer a resident? Where is she? Mrs. Clark's expression didn't change. Your husband, Orion, checked her out 6 months ago. He signed all the necessary paperwork. I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep myself from falling. My mind was reeling. 6 months. Orion had been faking his Sunday visits for 6 months. Did he say where he was taking her? I stammered, trying to sound like a confused, concerned wife. Mrs. Clark shook her head. He was very clear that he was moving her to a specialized facility to handle a change in her condition. He said it was a private family matter and that all communication should go through him. We had no reason to question it. I stumbled back to my car, the nurse's words echoing in my head. A specialized facility. A private family matter. They were all lies. Calculated, cruel lies to cover his tracks. He had pulled his own mother out of this safe, beautiful place, not for her health, but for his wallet. He needed every last penny for Serena, for their new house, for their new life. He had hidden his mother away somewhere, and for 6 months, no one, not even me, had noticed. The scope of his cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just a cheat. He was a monster. Sitting in the parking lot of the place Eleanor used to call home, I pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled so badly I could barely press the numbers. I called the only person I could trust. Mr. Graves, I said, my voice a broken whisper when he answered. It's Serena Bates. I have another job for you. It's urgent. I took a deep breath, the cold rage pushing past the shock and the pain. You need to find someone. You need to find Eleanor Bates. I told him everything I had just learned. I could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. This was no longer a simple case of a cheating husband. I want you to find where he took her, I said, my voice growing stronger, harder. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. Find her. There was a brief silence, and then Mr. Graves' calm, steady voice cut through my panic. I'm on it, Mrs. Bates. I'll find her. Hours later, I was home, standing in my kitchen, stirring a pot of soup I had no intention of eating. I was a statue, just going through the motions of being Orion's wife. My phone buzzed on the counter, jolting me back to life. It was a text from Mr. Graves. It was short. It was simple. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever read. It was an address for a place called Maple Creek Care Center. And below the address, a single chilling sentence. I found her, Serena. But you need to prepare yourself. This place. It's not like the Willows. Not at all. My phone felt cold and heavy in my hand. Maple Creek Care Center. The name itself sounded grey and hopeless. Mr. Graves' warning, prepare yourself, echoed in my head, a drumbeat of pure dread. Orion would be home in a few hours, expecting dinner, expecting his smiling, simple wife. But that woman was gone. I walked to the kitchen counter, wrote a quick note. Feeling unwell, went to lie down. Help yourself to the soup. And stuck it on the fridge. Then, I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, into the growing darkness. I had to see. I had to know. The drive to Maple Creek was the opposite of the drive to the Willows. There were no tree-lined streets or beautiful houses. Instead, my car's headlights cut through decaying industrial parks and rows of dark, forgotten storefronts. I was in a part of the city I had never been to, a place where hope seemed to have packed its bags and left a long time ago. Finally, my GPS announced I had arrived. The building was a flat, brick box under a flickering street lamp. The sign out front had peeling letters, and the garden beds were choked with weeds. This was not a home. This was a warehouse for the forgotten. The moment I pushed open the heavy front door, the smell hit me. It was a thick, sour mix of bleach, boiled vegetables, and a deep underlying sadness that seemed to have soaked into the very walls. The air was heavy and still. The light in the hallway was a dim, buzzing yellow that made everything look sickly. A woman with tired, empty eyes sat behind a scratched-up desk. She didn't even look up from her magazine when I approached. This place was the polar opposite of the Willows. There was no kindness here, only tired routine. "I'm here to see Eleanor Bates," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The woman sighed, as if I were a huge inconvenience. She slowly flipped through the pages of a stained, 3-ring binder. "Bates. Bates. Yeah. Room 207B. Down the hall to the left." She waved a dismissive hand and went back to her magazine. 207B. The B hit me like a punch. Eleanor, who had always had her own beautiful private room, was now sharing. She was now just a letter added to a room number. I walked down the long, linoleum hallway. The silence was broken by the sound of a television blaring a game show from one room, and a low, painful moan from another. I saw elderly people sitting in wheelchairs in the hallway, staring at nothing, their faces blank. They looked like ghosts, lost and alone. With every step I took, the cold rage inside me burned hotter. How could he? How could any son do this to his own mother? He had not just moved her, he had thrown her away. The door to 207B was cracked open. I could hear the faint, rhythmic beeping of a machine. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. For a second, I wanted to turn around, to run back to my car and pretend I had never seen this place. I was terrified of what I would find on the other side of that door. But the thought of Eleanor alone in here gave me a strength I didn't know I had. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was tiny and smelled like medicine. There were 2 beds, separated by a thin, faded curtain. In the bed near the grimy window, a small figure lay perfectly still. Her back was to me. I walked closer, my shoes silent on the worn floor. "Eleanor," I whispered. The figure stirred. She slowly, painfully, turned over. It was her, but it was a version of her I had never seen. She was so thin, her skin was pale and papery, and her eyes, once so full of life and laughter, were clouded over with confusion. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see she didn't recognize me. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "Eleanor, it's me. It's Yesenia." I took her hand. It felt as fragile as a bird's wing. A flicker of light appeared in her eyes. "Yesenia," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Orion. Orion said you were all so busy. He said not to call. He said he would tell you when you could visit." The lies he had told her, to keep her isolated, to keep her quiet, were almost too much to bear. Tears streamed down my face as I held her hand, promising her I would get her out of there, that everything would be okay. Her grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. I realized she was clutching something tightly in her other fist, holding on to it like a lifeline. "What is that, Eleanor?" I asked gently. With great effort, she opened her trembling fingers. It was a small, worn piece of paper, folded into a tiny square. It looked like she had been holding it for a very long time. I carefully unfolded it. I thought it might be a letter, or a picture. But it wasn't. It was a business card. The card was for a place I had never heard of, Lock-Safe Storage Solutions. Below the name was an address and a unit number. Number 347. I stared at the card, 100 new questions exploding in my mind. Why would Eleanor, trapped in this horrible place, be holding a business card for a storage unit? What on earth had Orion hidden away? And how was I going to find out? Leaving Eleanor in that grey, hopeless room was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I squeezed her fragile hand, my heart aching. "I'll be back for you," I whispered, my voice thick with tears I refused to let fall. "I promise. Just hold on a little longer." She looked at me, a flicker of understanding in her clouded eyes, before she drifted off to sleep. I gently took the small business card from her grasp. It felt like a sacred clue, a key to a puzzle I was now desperate to solve. I had to leave her there, for now. I couldn't risk moving her until I had a real plan, and real power. I didn't go home. The thought of facing Orion, of making small talk while this new horrific knowledge burned inside me, was impossible. I typed the address for Lock-Safe Storage Solutions into my phone and drove. My entire world had shrunk down to a single mission. It was no longer just about a cheating husband and stolen money. This was about saving a life. This was about Eleanor. The further I drove, the more my sorrow and fear hardened into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. He would not get away with this. I would burn his entire world to the ground. The storage facility was a sprawling, anonymous place. It was a maze of identical metal garage doors under the harsh glare of orange security lights. It felt like a graveyard for secrets, a place where people locked away the parts of their lives they wanted to forget. I found the row for unit number 347 and stood before the cold, corrugated steel door. It was sealed with a heavy-duty padlock. Of course, it was locked. For a moment, I felt a wave of despair. I had come all this way, but I was blocked by a simple piece of metal. But the old Yesenia, the one who would have given up and gone home to cry, was gone. The new Yesenia pulled out her phone and dialed the one person she knew could help. "Mr. Graves," I said, the moment he answered. My voice was steady, without a trace of the panic I felt inside. "I'm at a storage facility. I need to get into unit number 347. It's locked, and I don't have a key. Can you get me in?" I heard him take a slow breath on the other end. "Mrs. Bates," he said carefully, "what you're asking for is illegal." I didn't hesitate. "I know, but my mother-in-law's life might depend on what's inside. Can you help me?" There was a long pause. I thought he was going to refuse, to tell me it was too risky. Then he spoke again, his voice firm. "Stay where you are. Don't talk to anyone. A friend of mine will be there in 30 minutes. Pay him in cash and forget his face." He hung up. I stood in the shadows between the storage units, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and adrenaline. I was breaking the law. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. But I also knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was doing the right thing. A discreet white van pulled up 20 minutes later. A man in a simple work uniform got out, carrying a toolbox. He didn't say a word, just nodded at me and got to work on the lock. The sound of his tools clicking and scraping seemed impossibly loud in the silent night. I kept watch, my eyes scanning the empty rows, terrified a security guard or even Orion himself might appear out of the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, there was a loud, satisfying click. The lock was open. I paid the man, and he vanished as silently as he had arrived. With a deep breath, I grabbed the handle of the metal door and pulled. It rolled up with a loud, groaning shriek that echoed through the facility. I peered into the darkness, using my phone's flashlight to see. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't full of incriminating business files or bags of money. It was Eleanor's life. All of it. Her beautiful antique armchair, her collection of porcelain birds, her favorite reading lamp. Everything from her lovely room at the Willows was crammed in here, wrapped in plastic and covered in a thin layer of dust. He hadn't sold any of it. He had just hidden it. He had packed up his mother's entire existence and locked it away in the dark. It was so much crueler than just selling it. It was as if he was trying to erase her, to pretend she never existed. I stepped inside, the air thick with the smell of dust and forgotten memories. I saw boxes labeled photos, letters, keepsakes. He had stored away every piece of her, every piece of his own childhood. Tears finally began to stream down my face as I opened a box labeled Photos. There were pictures of Orion as a little boy, smiling on his mother's lap. Pictures from family vacations. Pictures of a happy family that now felt like a complete lie. How could that smiling little boy grow up to be the monster who would do this? Tucked inside a heavy photo album, I found a manila folder. My hands shook as I opened it. It contained her medical records from the Willows. The first document was a diagnosis from her doctor. It said she had a mild, manageable memory condition. Nothing serious. It confirmed she was, for the most part, healthy and lucid. But behind that document was another one, a prescription slip from a new doctor I didn't recognize. It was dated just 1 week after Orion moved her to Maple Creek. I read the name of the medication and my blood turned to ice. It was a powerful sedative, a drug known to cause confusion and drowsiness in the elderly. A chilling, horrifying thought slammed into me. He wasn't just neglecting her. He was actively, deliberately, having her drugged. I stood in the cold, dusty air of the storage unit, a single piece of paper trembling in my hand. The prescription slip felt heavier than a stone. It was not just a piece of paper. It was a weapon. A weapon Orion was using against his own mother. The name of the drug, the name of the doctor. It was all here. He wasn't just letting her fade away in a place of neglect. He was actively pushing her into the darkness, drugging her into a quiet, confused state so she could never tell anyone the truth. In that moment, something inside me broke for the final time. The last little piece of the loving wife I used to be turned to ash and blew away. I knew I couldn't leave this evidence behind. I grabbed the entire folder of Eleanor's medical records, tucked it under my arm, and closed the storage unit, replacing the broken lock with a new one I found in the locksmith's kit he'd left behind. I had to protect this place, this crime scene. My crime scene. Driving home, the streets were a blur of meaningless lights. My mind was a razor-sharp machine, focused on one thing only. The name on the prescription slip. Dr. Alastair Finch. Who was he? Was he a monster like Orion, or just a fool who had been tricked? I slipped back into the house like a shadow. Orion was asleep in our bed, snoring softly, completely unaware that his wife had just declared a silent, secret war on him. I lay down beside him, the cold space between us feeling as wide as an ocean. I didn't sleep. I just stared into the darkness. The image of Eleanor's frail hand and the doctor's looping signature burned into my mind. The old me would have been crying, shaking with fear. But the new me felt a strange, terrifying calm. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, while Orion was in the shower, I was in his study, my fingers flying across the computer keyboard. I searched for Dr. Alastair Finch. The results were unsettling. He had a small, cheap-looking website for a private practice on the other side of town. There were no smiling photos, no glowing reviews. In fact, the only 2 reviews I could find were negative, both vaguely mentioning that the doctor was quick to write prescriptions without asking too many questions. My heart sank. This wasn't a doctor Orion had tricked. This was a doctor he had sought out. The internet wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed a professional. I waited until Orion left for his important meeting. Then I called Mr. Graves. My voice was different now when I spoke to him. It wasn't the voice of a scared, heartbroken victim. It was the voice of a client, a boss. Mr. Graves, I said, getting straight to the point. I have a new name for you. Dr. Alastair Finch. He prescribed a dangerous sedative to my mother-in-law. I need to know everything about him. I want to know if he's a real doctor, if he has complaints against him, and if he has any connection to my husband. While I waited for his call, I walked through my quiet, perfect house. For a moment, I thought about my children, my 2 grown kids who were off living their own lives. Should I call them? Should I tell them what their father had become? A wave of protective love washed over me. No, not yet. This was my fight. I would not pull them into this darkness until I had to. I would bear this burden alone, to protect them from the truth about the man they called Dad. It was a lonely feeling, but it made my resolve even stronger. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Graves. "I have something for you, Jasenia," he said, and for the first time, I heard a note of real anger in his professional voice. Dr. Finch is a licensed doctor, but just barely. He lost his medical license in Arizona 5 years ago for overprescribing painkillers. He moved here, got his license back under review, and now runs a private pay practice. He caters to clients who want privacy and no difficult questions. My blood ran cold. Orion had found the perfect criminal partner. "So he's a dirty doctor," I said, my voice flat. "That's exactly what he is," Mr. Graves confirmed. The proof was good. It showed Orion's intent. He had sought out a corrupt doctor to drug his mother. But as I was processing this, Mr. Graves spoke again, his voice dropping lower. "But Jasenia," he said slowly, "that's not even the most interesting part. I did a deep financial search, like you asked." I held my breath. "What did you find?" I asked. "I found the payments," he said. "Dr. Finch has been receiving $5,000, in cash, on the first of every month for the last 6 months. It's hush money, to keep him prescribing that sedative and to keep his mouth shut. But the money isn't coming from your husband's accounts." I was completely confused. If Orion wasn't paying him, who was? Who else would want Eleanor silenced? Then who is it? I demanded, my mind racing through 100 impossible scenarios. Mr. Graves paused for a second before delivering the final, devastating blow. "The payments," he said, his voice grim, "are being delivered by a courier service. A service that is being paid for by a small, private company. A company that is owned, lock, stock, and barrel, by one person, Serena Vance." The phone felt slick with sweat in my hand. Serena Vance. The name dropped into the silence of the room like a stone into a deep, dark well. For all this time, I had pictured her as a simple, greedy young woman who had been fooled by my husband's lies and money. I saw her as a symptom of his betrayal. But the truth was so much worse. She wasn't a symptom. She was the disease. She was not a passenger in Orion's evil plan. She was in the driver's seat, her hands firmly on the wheel, steering him toward this new, unimaginable level of cruelty. 1,000 questions exploded in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. Why? Why would Serena care about Eleanor? What could a frail, elderly woman possibly mean to her? It couldn't just be about the money. Hiding and drugging an old woman was a complicated, risky, and deeply evil act. There had to be another reason, something darker and more personal. Did Eleanor know something about Serena? Had she discovered something that made her a threat? My mission had suddenly changed. It was no longer enough to understand my husband. I had to understand his monster. When Mr. Graves spoke again, his voice pulled me back from the edge. "Jasenia, are you there?" I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Yes," I said, my own voice sounding distant and strange. "Forget Orion for now. I need you to change your focus. I want to know everything there is to know about Serena Vance. Where she came from, who her family is, where she got her money. Dig into her past. I want to know every secret she has, every skeleton she has buried. I need to know why she is doing this." The wait for his call back was agonizing. That evening, Orion came home, smiling and cheerful, talking about a deal he had supposedly closed. He looked at me, sitting quietly on the sofa, and seemed to notice my silence for the first time. "You okay, sweet pea? You've been quiet all day." I looked straight into his eyes, the eyes of the man I had loved, the father of my children, and felt nothing but ice. "I was just thinking about your mother," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "We haven't visited in a while. Maybe we could go this Sunday." I watched him closely. For a split second, I saw it. a flicker of pure panic in his eyes. He recovered quickly, forcing a sad smile. "Oh, honey," he said, shaking his head. "I didn't want to tell you, to worry you. Mom, she's had a bit of a setback. The doctors at her new facility said she's very confused and shouldn't have any visitors for a while. It would just upset her." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. He squeezed my hand. "Don't you worry. I'm handling it." He had no idea I already knew the truth. The next day, Mr. Graves called. "Serena Vance is a tough one to crack," he began. "On the surface, she's perfect. Graduated top of her class, started a small but successful marketing firm 3 years ago. No criminal record. Everyone who knows her says she's brilliant, charming, and ambitious. This was the woman who was slowly destroying my life. A perfect, polished predator. For a moment, my heart sank. How could I fight someone so clever? But, Mr. Graves continued, people who try that hard to look perfect are almost always hiding something. She's not from here. She moved from a very small town in Oregon about 3 years ago, right before she started her company. Before that, her history gets blurry. It's like she fell off the face of the earth and then reappeared here, completely reinvented." My pulse quickened. People only reinvent themselves when they are running from something. What was she running from? I asked, my voice a whisper. "I'm not sure yet," Mr. Graves admitted. "But I did find something deeply disturbing. Her mother. She passed away 4 years ago, back in that same small town. She was also in a nursing home." A cold dread washed over me. I felt like I was watching the same horrible story play out for a second time. This couldn't be a coincidence. "Mr. Graves," I said, my voice shaking, "how did her mother die?" He paused. "That's the interesting part. The official cause of death was listed as an accidental overdose of her medication. But according to a few old articles from the local paper, some of her family members protested the ruling. They claimed she had been perfectly healthy. They thought something was wrong." My mind was spinning. An elderly mother in a nursing home, dying from an overdose of her medication? It was too similar. It was a pattern. What happened? I pushed. "Who made that ruling?" Mr. Graves' voice was grim. "That's the part one thought you should know. I'm sending you a link to the article now. The lead police investigator who ruled the death an accident was forced to resign a year later in a different corruption scandal." My blood turned to ice as a horrifying suspicion began to form. "Mr. Graves," I said slowly, "what was that investigator's name?" He didn't have to hesitate. His last name was Finch. He's Dr. Alastair Finch's older brother. The connection was a lightning bolt that struck my heart and traveled through every inch of my body. Finch. The doctor drugging Eleanor in North Carolina and the corrupt investigator covering up a death in Oregon were brothers. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a conspiracy. It was a well-practiced, evil machine. Serena Vance was not a homewrecker. She was a black widow. And my husband, my foolish, arrogant husband, was just the next fly to be caught in her web. The realization was so huge, so monstrous, that it stole the air from my lungs. Everything clicked into place. The pattern was so clear now, so horribly simple. Step 1. Find a wealthy, trusting man with an aging mother. Step 2. Seduce him, gain his trust, and get control of his finances. Step 3. Isolate the mother, moving her somewhere no one will ask questions. Step 4. Use her partners in crime, the Finch brothers, to medically imprison and silence her. And then, Step 5. What was Step 5? My blood ran cold as I remembered the newspaper article. An accidental overdose. She wasn't just planning to silence Eleanor. She was planning to kill her. This was no longer about my broken heart or our stolen savings. This was no longer even about revenge. This was a race against time to save a life. To save 2 lives. As much as I hated Orion for what he had done to me, he was still the father of my children, and he was a pawn in a game so deadly he couldn't even see the board. Serena was the queen, and she was positioning her pieces for the final checkmate. I was the only person on earth who knew the truth. I was the only one who could stop her. I knew what I needed. I had a mountain of evidence, but it was all separate pieces. I needed the final piece, the one that tied Serena's past to her present. The one that proved what she was planning for Orion and Eleanor. Mr. Graves had done enough. He had put himself at risk for me. This next step, this final dangerous move, I had to do myself. I had to get inside her lair. I had to get inside my grandmother's house. A place full of my childhood memories, now the headquarters of a monster. I called Mr. Graves one last time, not as a client, but as a partner. I need to know when they are out of the house, I said, my voice low and steady. I need a window of at least 2 hours when the house is empty. Can you do that for me? He didn't ask why. He didn't warn me against it. I think he heard the change in my voice. He knew this was the final move. I'll watch them, he said simply. I will text you when it's safe. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Graves. Dinner at Rossi's. You have until 10 p.m. This was it. I drove to the familiar street, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I parked a block away and walked through the shadows, every nerve on fire. I circled around to the back of the small blue house. My house. In the overgrown garden, right by the back steps, was a loose stone, a little different from the others. I knelt down, my hands shaking, and pulled it free. Tucked in the cool dirt underneath was a small, tarnished silver key. The spare key my grandmother had told me about, a secret I had never even shared with Orion. The key slid into the lock and turned with a quiet click. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. The house was silent and cold. All of my grandmother's warm, familiar furniture was gone. It had been replaced with sleek, modern, soulless pieces of black and white. It felt like a stranger's house. It was clear this was Serena's territory. I went straight for the small room she was using as a home office. I had to be fast. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I would recognize it when I saw it. Her desk was neat, her files perfectly organized. Her laptop was on, but it was password protected. I felt a surge of frustration. My time was running out. I scanned the room, my eyes darting everywhere. In the corner of the room, tucked away in a closet, was a small, black, fireproof safe. My heart leaped. This had to be it. It was locked with a digital keypad. I tried birthdays, anniversaries, anything I could think of for Orion. Nothing worked. It was Serena's secret, her code. I was about to give up, to accept defeat, when my eyes landed on the only personal item on her entire desk. It was a small, silver picture frame. In it was a photo of a younger Serena, smiling, with her arm around an older woman. Her mother. It was the only sign of warmth in the entire house. On a desperate hunch, I picked up the frame. It felt heavy. I turned it over. Taped securely to the cardboard backing was a small, folded piece of paper. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. It wasn't a password. It wasn't a key. It was a document. A life insurance policy. It was brand new, issued just 1 month ago by a company I had never heard of. I read the name of the insured person, and the world stopped spinning. It was Orion Bates. And the sole beneficiary, the person who would receive $5 million upon his death, was Serena Vance. The final horrifying piece of the puzzle slammed into place. She wasn't just planning to ruin him. She was planning to kill him. I stood in the cold, silent office of my grandmother's house, the life insurance policy in my hand, feeling like a death sentence. This was it. This was the final, ugly piece of their plan. It wasn't just about greed anymore. It was about premeditated murder. I took out my phone and carefully photographed every single page of the policy, my hands steady, my mind clear. Then, I folded the document perfectly and placed it back inside the picture frame, taping it securely to the back. I put the frame back on the desk, exactly where I had found it. They could never know I was there. My entire plan depended on them believing, until the very last second, that I was still their fool. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. A simple arrest wasn't enough. They didn't deserve a quiet, legal process. They deserved to be exposed. They deserved to be trapped by their own greed and arrogance. I was going to set a stage, and they were going to be the stars of their own downfall. The next morning, I made a phone call. I waited until I knew Orion would be in his office, busy and distracted. I made my voice sound shaky, confused, and small, the voice of the woman he thought he had married. Orion. I whispered into the phone. Honey, something so strange just happened. I got a call from a woman at the Willows. You know, your mother's old nursing home. She said they found some old paperwork of Eleanor's and that you needed to sign it. I paused, letting the bait hang in the air. She said it was something about her original life insurance policy. The one that lists me as the secondary beneficiary. Isn't that strange? I could almost feel his panic through the phone line. I had just made myself a direct threat to Serena's $5 million prize. I knew exactly what would happen next. He would hang up and immediately call Serena. He would tell her that his dumb wife was accidentally stumbling toward the truth. They would panic. They would feel their perfect plan starting to slip through their fingers. And when people like them panic, they get sloppy. They would decide they needed to act fast, to silence me or deal with the situation before I could cause any more trouble. They would decide to confront me together. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the animals to walk into it. That evening, I prepared the scene. I sat in the big armchair in our living room, the one where I had first cried over the photographs from Mr. Graves. But I wasn't crying now. On the coffee table in front of me, I laid out my evidence in neat, damning piles. The pictures of him and Serena. The bank statements showing the stolen money. The fraudulent loan documents. A copy of the form changing his pension. The medical records from Maple Creek and the prescription for the sedatives. And right in the middle, a perfect, high-quality print of the $5 million life insurance policy. The front door opened. They walked in together, a united front of arrogance and deceit. They saw me sitting there and their faces hardened, ready to gaslight me, to call me crazy. But then, their eyes fell on the coffee table. I watched the color drain from Orion's face. I watched Serena's confident smirk falter as she saw her entire evil plan laid out like a museum exhibit. Before they could speak, a man stood up from the shadows in the corner of the room. It was Mr. Graves. He was not just my investigator. He was my witness. What is all this? Orion stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the table. I looked at him, not with rage, not with sadness, but with a calm, cold power he had never seen before. This, I said, my voice clear and strong, is the truth. From your affair, to the money you stole, to the house you gave away. From drugging your own mother to the $5 million plan to have me collect on your accidental death. I turned my eyes to Serena. A plan you've used before, haven't you, Serena? In a small town in Oregon. Serena's face turned to stone, but Orion just stared at her, his mind finally, painfully, putting the pieces together. He looked broken. You called me dumb, Orion, I said softly. While you were busy thinking I was too simple to notice, I was busy planning. That pension you signed over to Serena? A judge nullified that document last week, citing your financial recklessness. All our assets are frozen and under my control. And my grandmother's house? That illegal $1 transfer was reversed this morning. It's mine again. As the reality of their ruins settled over them, the doorbell rang. Mr. Graves opened it to reveal two uniformed police officers. He handed them a thick file containing copies of everything. As the officers stepped forward, Serena, the cold predator, finally crumbled. Orion just stood there, a hollowed-out man, destroyed by his own weakness. He had made a deal with a monster, never realizing that he was meant to be the final meal. They were both escorted out in handcuffs, their reign of terror over. Today, Eleanor is back at the Willows. She is safe, she is cared for, and she smiles again. I visit her every day. I am not just a wife or a mother anymore. I am a woman who found her own strength in the darkest of places. They thought a quiet woman was a weak woman. But they learned that a quiet woman is simply listening, watching, and planning her checkmate. My story had a just ending, but so many others don't. If you believe in the power of truth and fighting back, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and empowerment. Thank you for watching.